All right, welcome to the third installment of Satan in Judaism with Or Shalom Synagogue right behind me. I am Scott Meltzer, the rabbi of Or Shalom Synagogue. Tonight is March 27th, 2025, and we are continuing what we've been doing. Again, I will remind everybody that if you would like to see the handouts for each of the classes, if you go to orshalom.org, click on education, and click on Satan in Judaism, it will bring you to the homepage where you will have links to the recordings. If you're watching this on the recording, maybe that's how you found it anyway, but it also has links to the first session where we took a look at, we called Satan a verb, and we looked at what the word meant and how it was used in a number of places in the Bible, in the Tanakh. Then the second session, we focused specifically on the book of Job. Some of the Job stuff will come back again tonight. And then tonight, as you can see on the handout, we will be taking a look at the Satan of the Talmud. And in some ways, the way we come to this class, and I think that when I swap out my kippah for my sociology kippah, rather than my shul rabbi kippah, I know it looks the same to you. One of the things that I find to be distinct about Judaism compared to the other religions that we think of as Western religions is we have about 1,000 years of history, including textual history, before the world went Greek or Aristotelian, and then is influenced by the Persians. We just had Purim, so my mind is very much in Paras, in Persia. And I think that has allowed Judaism to maintain some of the insights, some of the cosmology, worldview of what the world is, of the pre-Greek or pre-Roman world. And I think coming to Satan is a good example to that. The idea of Satan is an idea that comes into history. That's why it doesn't exist as some form of divine or angelic figure in 98% of the Bible, Hebrew Bible. I say Bible here, and I mean Tanakh, our Bible. It appears, or he appears in Job, we talked about last time, also makes an appearance in the prophets Zechariah, Zechariah, but the rest of the Bible is freed from a character called Satan, and instead we have a verb, we have a place name, we have, go back and look at the first piece. So when the idea of Satan develops and evolves over time, Judaism, I think, is much more comfortable living in a sort of a polyvalent world of who or what is Satan than certainly Christianity. And I think that's true for two reasons. I think that's true, one, because of what I just said, that Judaism is much closer to our really ancient roots. Christianity is born in the Roman period, so it doesn't have really ancient roots. It only has late ancient roots, so to speak. And then the other reason I think is important is Satan isn't central to Judaism, which is why my guess is if we pulled around the 16 screens that are in the Zoom room, most of you would tell me that you didn't know that Satan existed in Judaism, or maybe other than the book of Job, you didn't know that Satan existed in Judaism. And yet there is this rich history of Satan, and kind of there are two glory points, I think. One is the Talmud and classic Midrash, and the other is later medieval stuff. We'll see, again, how much of that we'll get to in the fourth, maybe fourth and fifth sessions. So that's the 3 points, I guess, that I hope that people will hold in their head that I've introduced before and that will continue. One is, by the nature of who we are as a people and our developing understanding of the world and of God and of all the rest, we live in a polyvalent reality. We just do, much more comfortably than our younger siblings in the religious world. That's one. Two, for that reason, when we come to Satan, like many other concepts or ideas that are originate in time and then evolve and continue to evolve, we don't have a neat, clean picture of Satan. And all of our different pictures aren't just variations off of one. They're actually pretty darn diverse. And then third, Satan is never a major player in Judaism. It's a neat idea. It's an idea that develops in Judaism, right? The first appearance that we know of is the book of Job. And then he has his own life beyond Judaism, growing. I've said it before, Milton's Satan is my favorite one. If you haven't read Paradise Lost, it's not a Jewish book. He's not a Jewish author, but he's a great author, and it's a phenomenal piece. Anybody who does read it, I would love to buy you a cup of coffee and get to sit and talk to you about Milton, because it's great stuff. But we have all of these different pictures because the development of Satan here I believe, is parallel to the development of afterlife thought. And the reason I think both of them develop in their multiplicity or inconsistencies is they are attempts to try and make sense of the parts of the world that we can't make sense of. And, if you were a polytheist, then you can just say, well, blame that one on Athena or Aphrodite or Zeus, or go all the way back. Father Time Kronos can be blamed for. If you're a polytheist, you have lots of options to try and explain inconsistencies and injustices and things we don't like about the world. As monotheism develops, you got a real problem because it's all part of God. And so both the development of the afterlife, which isn't tonight, and the development of Satan are ways to try and navigate the complexity of the world we live in, the lives that we lead, and to make it work in the context of what we believe as Judaism, 20 whatnot centuries ago became monotheistic. All right, any questions or comments on that by way of introduction? Why besides just liking the text, I find the Satan stuff to be very, very important as an example of everything I just explained. Faces look pensive. No hands go up. Nobody. Feel free to unmute and just interrupt me. You need not raise your hand or throw something in the chat window. Again, to the extent to which we can make it feel like we're all sitting in the boardroom off the beam around that big table is what I would like to happen.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
about your 3 points that you had, I'm curious why we're doing the Talmud before the Mishnah. The Mishnah comes chronologically before the Talmud.
Nice, because maybe if we were doing a full semester, and if I had, 32 sessions or whatnot to do this, then I could break it up and do it quite differently. Most of the stuff that we're going to look at is, moment of background, the Babylonian Talmud, what we normally mean when we say Talmud, is a work that merges two different literatures. The earlier literature that we call the Mishnah, or the Mishnah of Yehuda HaNasi. I didn't mean to do that dismissively, Jen. I apologize. That was recorded too, my little hand dismissal. I can't deny it. The Mishnah, early 3rd century of the Common Era. And then that becomes the central text of our ancestors, and they continue to discuss it and tell stories and. And all of that collected literature broadly is called the Gemara. And at some point, a group of people that we call the Savoraim, they edited the Mishnah with this huge corpus called the Gemara, and they sliced it up. And they took each of the individual Mishnayot, at least as they enumerated them, and they said, ooh, these pieces of later stories, commentaries, arguments, seemingly irrelevant pieces, all seem to fit in the flow of conversation. And then the next Mishnah, and that's what we call the Talmud. It is this fascinating text that builds off of the earlier Mishnah and does it. We also have a Jerusalem Talmud, often in English. Classically, the Jerusalem Talmud is often called the Palestinian Talmud. Interestingly enough, the Palestinian Talmud is a better name for it than Yerushalmi in Hebrew, because it actually is written and edited in Roman Palestine, or Syria Palestina, to be really correct. And it's not written nor edited in Jerusalem. So, it's a shame that we never named it as the, Talmud Shel Eretz Yisrael, because that would be lovely. Or the, Talmud HaGalilee, the Galilean Talmud or some such, but it is either the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem, or the Palestinian, similar things. Very long way of a little bit of background teaching for those who don't have much Talmud experience, to say that the earlier stuff, the Mishnah stuff, called the Tanaitic stratum of material, for reasons we could go into, which is the older material. Most of the Satan stuff is post that. Most of it is Amoraic, though that's not 100% correct. Some of the pieces that we will look at, I'm not sure any of them are in the Mishnah, but some of them are identified as Tanaitic texts, so meaning of the same age as the Mishnah, but not making it in the Mishnah. So anyway, I just took a lot of our time to say we don't have enough time to really do it separate.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right. What is, who is, I will even say, why is Satan? The one question that I don't think we're going to try to answer, though, there are 13 pages of text on that handout, so I cannot say with confidence that I have them all in my head as I organize and as we go through them. I don't think when, there's some sense of chronology because Garden of Eden stuff is relevant and so forth. But mostly the questions that I want to ask about Satan in the world is what, who, and why. Okay, these are all stories. Okay, we are in the world of Jewish folklore, sacred folklore, but it's folklore. I think that even, I would argue, and I can't prove it, that even the sages of the Talmud, whether that's the sages who are named in the text that we are going to read, or my comment really is about the 5th or 6th or 7th century, these groups that we call the Sephoraim, who are kind of the anthologizers and editors who create the Talmud that we know. I don't think they believed that most of these stories actually happened. I think they understood that they functioned in a realm of sacred folklore. And so when Satan talks to God about Abraham and why Abraham seems to be getting an easy pass, I don't think the author of that story believed that some heavenly figure called Satan spoke to God about Abraham. I think that actually trivializes their genius. I think that whoever invented that story knew that they were inventing that story. Okay, and they did so sometimes because they're great stories. Satan, not only in Christianity, but in Judaism, is a sexual character. Okay, so there's going to be smut tonight. A disclaimer, I don't know, looking around the room, I'm trying to decide who I think is. Julie, you're probably the youngest one in the room, but you're married, so we should be okay. Smut is kind of what we do whenever we study Talmud in Or Shalom, and Satan is a wonderful place for that. So I don't think that even the stories about characters, when Satan appears to Rabbi Akiva, I don't think the author of that text believes that that happened. I don't think the Rabbi Akiva said, oh my God, Rachel, you know what happened to me today? Satan appeared to me. Okay, I think that trivializes the pedagogy of our tradition. We are in a world of pedagogic folklore. They create stories and then canonize those stories because those stories teach us something. That's my what, who, and why as it relates to the world here in the micro detail of Satan. What role does Satan play? Why did Satan get invented? Why did the author of this story, create a story or an image of Satan that looks like X or Y or Z? And we don't always know. And, I'm confident we will come up with different theories and explanations as we go through it. But that's the frame. Okay, we are reading the sacred literature of our people that has been at the core of sacred literatures for, well over 1,000 years. It's nice not have to be very historically accurate as we go. And it continues as a literature to play a role in shaping Jewish identity, Jewish visions of cosmology. That is, what is the world? Okay. If you attend a physics lecture, they will tell you what the world is. If you go attend a biology lecture, if you attend a history lecture, if you will, right there, a psychology lecture, they are all different languages to try and understand the nature of the world and who we are and how we live in it and so forth. And they all carry some kind of truth about them, or you have the wrong biology teacher. And the same thing is true of our sacred tradition. It is another literature that's exploring the nature of the world and the human condition and how we live in it, but it has a very different methodology, very different hermeneutics, very different ontology, right? It's not biology or physics. It's not a system based on observation and an hypothesis and experimentation. It's not the nature. Ours is pedagogy, storytelling, ritual, community, right? That's the way in which we do what physicists and biologists and so forth do, each in their own field. We're a different field. And Satan, again, is great. So I'm going to get started. For the sake of time, I'm going to do what I hate to do and not read the Hebrew texts. And so Etty's on her iPhone or on her phone. So unless she printed it out, oh good, she's going to open her laptop. So she'll be the one who at times, I don't know if anybody else's Hebrew is good enough, maybe it is, to pull us into the Hebrew, sometimes Aramaic text. I may do it occasionally. We lose something when we only work in translation. Similar to we lose something when we're on Zoom instead of in the room. It's just something different that we lose. And when everybody wants to spend a couple of years and really develop a functionality in Rabbinic Hebrew and Rabbinic Aramaic, then we will do it closer tied to the text, or when we just have a lot more time. Who would read Roman numeral 1? Again, I don't know how many people printed it out or have it opened on a separate screen or are looking at it because I'm sharing screen, so you can't see.
Did you want me to read the Hebrew, or you don't want to read?
I've got 13 pages of text, and in theory, we might be able to get through 3 of the pages. If we do Hebrew, we'll get through even less. So you're welcome to follow along in the original and stop if you have any interesting observations to make from it. But we are going to focus on the English. The English is predominantly, not 100% true, but predominantly from the Schottenstein or the Davidson version of the Talmud, easily accessible through Sefaria.org, Sefaria.org, and the printing of the Schottenstein Talmud is such that when you look even at that first one, which is from the Babylonian Talmud, from a section called Baba Batra, which means the last gate, and you'll see that some of the text is in bold and some of the text is in regular print. The translator and the editors, when they produce this translation, the stuff that is as literal as they can be to the original is in bold, and all of the non-bold print is all the emendations they have made to try and explain it so that it's intelligible, because the one, we're working in translation, and two, the text itself is very terse. It leaves a lot for the reader to fill in the gaps. All right. Would somebody read the English? It was taught in a Braita.
I can read.
Oh, okay.
Sure, I'll read. It was taught in a Baraita with regard to the methods of the Satan. He descends to this world and misleads a person into sinning. He then ascends to heaven, levels accusations against that very sinner, and inflames God's anger against him. He then receives permission to act and takes away the sinner's soul as punishment.
Outstanding. So I think this is, the 4-part job description of Satan. The word Breita means that it's in the Talmud, again, Baba Batra 16a, A and B, because the classic Renaissance printing in Italy of the Talmud is folio. So rather than the way we do pages, front is page 1, the back is page 2, the next front is page 3, and so forth. The page itself is numbered, and there's a front side and a back side, or an A and a B side. And here, again, what is Satan? Who is Satan? And why is Satan? Somebody want to answer any piece of that based on this very first text that we're looking at? Crickets. Satan is crickets.
I can read.
He's located above because he comes down.
Good. Satan is heavenly, which is not generally the way other people describe Satan, but Satan is part of the divine council, or whatever it is up in the higher strata of the atmosphere. That's where Satan lives. What else? Who, what, or why is Satan?
He's a trickster or a devious actor.
How so?
The misleading. So
Yeah.
it suggests that the person wouldn't sin without having been misled by the malign force.
Good. So in terms of the who, how we understand Satan is, in English and Christianity, there's a love for the word tempter. So here it's misleading as opposed to tempting, but this is, Satan's the one who turns the arrows. You thought you're supposed to make a left in your life to stay on the holy path, and Satan turns the arrow to mislead you down the wrong path. So that's a who, right? But now what is Satan? Is Satan then becomes the opportunity or the excuse or the explanation for why you're like, how did I get here? I'm a good person. I know right from wrong. And holy cow, like I turned right instead of left, or how did I make the mistakes that have gotten me in such trouble in this world? Because it doesn't make sense to me. And not just me, but these people that I care about. They're good people, right? So, Freud will tell me that it's their mom's fault. They have a whole variety of ways to explain it. Satan explains it. Or this text in its vision or description of Satan explains it. Satan is the misleader. So if somebody got lost, it's because maybe not in all cases, maybe they're wicked people. Okay, fine. But when good people get lost, it's because they were misled. Okay, and the heavenly entity who misleads. So that is not the who is Satan. Satan is the misleader from the world above. But the what is Satan? Satan is the explanation or the excuse or the locus or the folklore about why sometimes good people do bad things, right? They don't do it because, they have a moment lapse of malice or evilness. And all of a sudden, I've been good my whole life, but wouldn't it be great to have an evil day? I'm going to go out and rob them. No, they were misled. So that's one. Anybody else want to chime in a bit on this first piece? Satan who descends into this world and who misleads people into making bad choices, right? People who sin maybe are misled. Who and what? And then why is that important? Well, it's really, really important because, accountability, culpability really matters. But sometimes it's hard to explain. Like I did it and it's my fault, but I'm not really sure how I got so confused to think that, throwing a rock through your window was a good thing. I don't know, whatever eating the pork chop. I don't care the detail. That I can't really explain it, but now I can explain it, right? Functionally, it's important. Anybody else want to add a piece?
Yeah, Gene. He not only inflames God's anger, so he has an impact on God.
You're way ahead of me.
He gets permission.
You're way ahead of me. I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
I'm going to stop you because I want to walk through. This is the first text that we're doing tonight. I want to walk through each of the jobs that Satan does, and they're in order, right? It's almost like, whatever, when you have a schedule. The first thing that Satan does is he descends. because he can only do it when he's on earth. And then he finds people and says, no, no, no. You think that feeding the poor is righteous, but wouldn't it be funny or better or whatever? I'm going to mislead you, and people get misled. Then what does Satan do? Or does somebody want to add something before we do the next step?
I do.
Please.
So there's, it's not just that, it's a way of explaining Yetzer Hara within people, but it's also and this is where I think the translation a little bit misses some of the meaning of notel reshut venotel neshama. He's a deceit. He goes and deceives and agitates, and then he takes the permission and he takes the neshama, which is, we sometimes translate it as soul, but it's really a little bit more than that. So there's something in there that's like an entity that has its own, it's a thing that has its own power that can influence people
An influence in the wrong direction.
in the wrong direction.
Good. So again, people are just pulling along, chomping at the bit to get to the latter part of the text. It will get to those latter stages. I want to acknowledge that you say evil inclination, but the text doesn't. I want us to pay attention to where the evil inclination is and isn't. The evil inclination generally is seen as an intrinsic quality of a human being. So we'll see what that means, moving past the top of the first page. And the parallel of the verb in the last two is also outstanding. All right. So Satan descends, he misleads, people are misled. Satan then goes back, which means goes up. And what does he do when he goes back up? He inflames God's anger. So what does he do to inflame God's anger? Well, the paradigm is what we have in Job and what we saw in Job. He says, oh my God, have you seen the crappy thing that all the human beings are doing? Even the one you think is righteous. I've got a taina, I've got a complaint against. But he goes up and arouses anger from God because he says, look, you told people they're supposed to go left and that guy went right. Well, yeah, because you misled him, right? That's the first part. Whose fault is it? I don't know. Maybe the human is still at fault, but Satan also has culpability that's not assigned to him. And God's response, I don't like God's response in the book of Job. Said it, I don't say last week. It was actually February 13th. It seems to me when Job says to God, when Satan says, or thus Satan says to God, Job is just, prudential, to borrow a Kantian term. Job just understands if you kiss up, you get chocolate cake. But that's okay. Where does it say in the system? It's not okay to do the right thing, but to do it because you know that there's some reward, right? That somehow that is some reason for your children to die and you to get ill. And so that was there. But here too, God's response to Satan saying, look at all the crap that they're doing, is to get mad, right? I think God is also misled by Satan here, right? Because God could also say, the only reason they went right is because you turned the sign around. You warped the logic. You were an influence to their getting it wrong. Yes? So, I would like the text to say that God gets mad at Satan, but that's not what happens here. But God gets mad, okay? And then, I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that before I get to the last four words.
Doesn't God give Satan permission to ascend to heaven? Doesn't God control heaven?
Well, so Satan lives in heaven, and Satan seems to go, as do all the other heavenly creatures, up and down, or, that's the funny piece in terms of Jacob's ladder and whatnot. We should say down and up by their own place. I don't know a Jewish text where divine beings are not permitted to go into the upper world. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Often I say things that I don't know when and I learn them. Yeah, Jonah?
According to this, is Satan an angel?
So he's not called an angel. I like the term divine being because I
Okay.
like the ambiguity of it. I don't know, Rocky put into a private chat to me about some of the other divine beings from the creation story. You know, Genesis 6 has this great, you know, divine beings who come down and have sex with human girls, women, whatever. All of these English terms and qualifiers and I find to bring a whole lot of baggage.
The reason I ask is because my understanding is angels have no free will. And so therefore he'd have to be doing God's direct instructions if that were the case.
So again, back to my inconsistencies of Judaism, I can bring you 100 texts where the angels have free will. So I can bring you text that says they don't, but you know, the Song of the Sea, the Midrash, that the angels are singing it because and God gets mad at the angels. When the Torah is given, they come up and complain to God. They do all kinds of things that I would say look like free will. I just don't like, there are species of divine beings in the Tanakh. There are both species of divine beings and individual divine beings, both in the Tanakh and in later rabbinic writings. As Jews, we're supposed to cringe anytime anybody questions that they have no doubt there is only one God. But like, I have this, the philosophical piece complains every time there are divine beings, and then we say we are monotheists. It's why I like the Kabbalah on a philosophical level better than anything else, because it's the purest monotheism in Judaism that I know. And then it's also the most superstitious and absurd and all kinds of other things at the same time. But in its worldview, in its cosmology, it's the purest monotheism. Because look at all of these divine beings in the Bible and later. And so I get uncomfortable when we give them a name that the Bible doesn't give them. There are individuals called malachim, angels. Okay, there are kinds of heavenly individuals, or again, species. There are ophanim, and there are kruvim, and there are seraphim, and there are, you know, the Genesis gate has this, it's translated as flaming sword. I lost the Hebrew for the name of that divine being. And I don't like to call them angels, right? If you want to translate the word malach as angel, okay. But every time somebody just says angel for all of them, it fails for me. And I'm just stuck with fat, naked babies with wings and harps, which are never Jewish images of angels and not biblical, not rabbinic, not Kabbalistic, not Zoharic. And they're really cute. I mean, the irony that we call them cherubim, they're cherubic, which is a great adjective in English. But the cherubs in the Bible are scary mythical monsters. They are. Now, you may be frightened by fat, naked babies with wings and harps. I don't know what you're, you know, we all have our own fear groups. All right, back to the text. So whether or not Satan could act without God's permission, I don't know. But in this text, Satan asks for and receives. He lifts up or is granted or receives or is given notel reshut, is given permission to act. Okay, so he's not, whether or not he could be independent, he doesn't take it upon his own accord, right? He accepts that he is administering divine judgment. God says, like in the book of Job, you can, now that I'm pissed off at these human beings, because you've told them everything that they have done wrong, because you've told me, God, everything that human beings have done wrong, whether or not you acknowledge that it's sort of your fault, or at least you're implicated because you misled them to do wrong. But now I, God, give you, Satan, permission, and then notel neshama, which is a parallel to notel reshut. He lifts up permission from God, and then he somehow takes away soulfulness, life, right? There are different readings of what the word means here. It literally means breathing, right? Like the breath. In the Bible, I'm comfortable that it means physical life. It doesn't mean anything spiritual or whatnot. It means breathing. Here, I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's a spiritual problem or an actual mortality problem. I'm confident that if we took a lot of time and looked at 1,000 years of commentary on this Talmudic passage, we would get different answers as to what it means. But it clearly isn't good to the human beings. All right. So this old text, it's Tannaitic, of Satan. The who? Satan is the heavenly being who comes down and misleads people so that then Satan can go back and tell God, look how crappy they are. So God will get pissed off. So the Satan will get permission to somehow damage them, whatever exactly that damage is. That's the who. The why? Well, again, I think it explains. It explains why human beings sometimes suck. Why good human beings, some human beings always suck, fine. But why good human beings sometimes not just make mistakes, but really do bad things. And then it explains why bad things then happen to those people. Why they're somehow punished or whatnot. And it leaves God mostly free from blame for any part of it. Right? Now, God does play a role in it, but God doesn't do the punishing here. And so I think that there is, I think that covers a lot of ground for human beings in terms of understanding why the world works the way that it works.
Are we to assume that God always gives permission to take away the sinner's soul?
Again, without my feeling confident that I know what the author of this text means by that last piece, whether that's like capital punishment or whether that's maybe, I guarantee you I could find eternal life explanations for it or exactly what that means. Maybe, but I don't think it happens all the time. I don't think that people are always held responsible for their actions. I don't think that people are always misled. I don't think that when people do bad things, I'm always comfortable with the idea that they were just misled or, led astray for some reason. So I'd be careful about making it the one size fit all explanation, but sometimes it sure seems to fit. If I had to come up with a story to explain, things that I've experienced, then, what was I thinking? Anybody ever say that to yourself? You don't have to give the detail. Just nod or raise the hand that you've woken up someday or you got to the end of the day or somebody sent you an email and you said, oh my God, I did do that. What was I thinking? Right? I think that it's not an uncommon human experience where, that's not me. That action's beneath me. I can't retrace the logic that got me into that. Like, how did I get here? Right? And I think that this is a text that does a whole lot of that. And the other side of it, which is also Jobin, is, when something bad happens, and it's not as simple as saying that people mostly get it good or figuring out who gets what. I think that that's also all contained within this in Hebrew, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. Right? We need a paragraph in English, but 8 words and 6 of them are verbs. It's a way cool text, even linguistically. All right.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yep.
Did you say that God was misled by Satan?
So
he was deceived by Satan?
Are you asking if I said that?
Yeah, did you say that earlier? I was listening, but then I started thinking, and I wasn't sure if I heard right.
Because the way I framed it, I think somebody can tell me if you think that Maria sounds more like what I said, is I don't like God's response, right?
Oh.
Because in theory, seems to me God should know that Satan misled these people, right? Now it doesn't mean that, right?
Because that would put God and Satan in the same position, in the same level, and God would probably know more than Satan.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good logic. But, part of what's at stake in the Job image, which I think is in the background here, is God shouldn't need the test. But that's also at stake in the Abraham story. And it says, that God nisait Abraham, God tested Abraham. And so, like, I know why I give a test to my students. I want them to do well. I help them study. I try to make a fair test. But then they're tested, and I don't really know. And often I'm surprised by who does well or whatever. So, but why does God need to test Abraham? And the tradition struggles with that, right? And so I can show you midrashim that say God tests Abraham or the test of Job, so that it then becomes a story, so that we can have a model of righteousness. But it's not because God, why would God need to test them, right? Like if God were a scientist, God won't have to climb up to the top, the Leaning Tower of Pisa with Galileo to drop, what did he drop? A brick in an egg or whatever he dropped to see that gravity accelerates. Acceleration's the same on all. God doesn't need to do that experiment. God's really good in physics. God knows how to calculate those things, right? But so we have examples where God is the experimenter. So why is God the experimenter? And the answer is, I don't know. Be very careful what you want to believe in God. Okay? I will just tell you, these are my biases and my comment, and I can defend it from the tradition. But in my experience, if I kind of owe it to a nice Jewish psychiatrist. If you haven't read Sheldon Cope, kind of very 70s, but everybody should read If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him, even though there's not a whole lot of Jewish text in that book. But read it anyway. If you have a nice, clean picture of God, you should tear it up. Right? It probably brings you comfort 90% of the time, maybe even 99% of the time. And comfort is nice. But whatever that clean, pretty picture is of God, I can describe to you a day when that picture will be a punishment and will be painful and will leave you struggling and will leave you needing to either say or do. I have a photo album, and it's got a lot of pages in it. It's got about 2,500 years of literary pages in portraits of God. And I think, yep, that's what God looks like to me. It looks like that 2,500 year collection of literary texts. And they all speak to some of them I don't get, but whatever. So I don't know. Okay, anything else on this first text? Because it's only 7:52, and we've done a third of a page on a 13-page handout. Learning is the journey of a lifetime. That's all I can say.
I don't want to delay us further, but you raised the concept of tests, and that lurks here. And I'm trying to figure out if there's a difference between testing a person and misleading a person.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And I think one of the things that's important to me in my reading of these 8 words in Hebrew is, as opposed to the story in Genesis 22 or the story in Job 1 and 2, where God creates a system, even if in Job it's at the pressuring of the Satan, God creates the test. Here, God doesn't say to Satan, let's test human beings. You go to earth and you grill pork ribs next to the meeting that goes late and nobody has dinner yet. So when they walk outside at 9 o'clock at night, having not had dinner yet, the first thing they smell, there's a guy, Thursdays at San Diego State up on the campus, they do like an outdoor food court, and people come in and set up their booths. A number of them have good veggie stuff. I've tasted a few of them. The guys on the corner, it's Africa, something. They grill this chicken every Thursday. That there's no reason why it couldn't be kosher. It's not. But I don't think they don't sprinkle it with dead pig or anything. It smells so good. When I come out of class and I teach till 12:15, it's about 12:45 by the time I'm almost back to my office, walking through the food booth. I smell this stuff and I think, do I really want to keep kosher? Because there's a Noah Ark reference there to God and smelling sacrifice that is for me a parallel too. But it's like Satan put that East African grill. They also do these collard greens and some other things that I do eat that are delicious, but nothing smells like that chicken. And they got this huge grill. Oh my God. So I've never tasted it. Someday, like if I ever walk out of class really drunk, I can't imagine why I would walk. I bet you that would be the first thing in terms of my impaired judgment I would do, is I would race to that corner thing. And I've been there for years and taste that chicken. So yes, in the context of this thing, it doesn't say God gives a test. I think one of the things that Satan does is it lets God off the hook for all kinds of problems, right? Here, the misleading is done by Satan and is not done by Satan as the ambassador or emissary from God. That's just what Satan does. And then he rats you out for it. I think that is important. All right, second text from same page of the Talmud, a little bit farther down the page. And I think that I don't, for the sake of time and to make the point that I want to make, the having to be honest in the Talmud, the text includes the proof text. It includes lines from Job in one proof text from Genesis to explain what it says. If we were doing it more methodologically methodically, and in general in Talmud study, there is a two different classic ways to study. One is I don't know what the word is in English, like a cursory or a survey. One covers a lot of text quickly, and one is in the details. Okay, so I've been in Talmud classes that spend a month on 8 words of Talmud. And for anybody who's doing Daf Yomi, there are people who go through a page a day or a page in 10 minutes, and you get a broad, so I'm going to do, at least for some of this, I'm going to push us. Otherwise, we really won't do it. But it's worth it. Come back to it. Yeah, Marvin, thank you for the devil made me do it. In fact, if you want to turn ahead, I even wrote that as a comment, since we probably won't get that far tonight. Oh, no. I have devil quoting scripture, not devil made me do it. The, Rabbi Flip Wilson is about, as Jewish as the sources that often say the devil quoting scripture. But there's a lot of that I can show you within our tradition, parallel ideas that are there, but I think contextually are very different because I think the role of Satan in our tradition is very, very different. All right, so I only want to read kind of the first couple of sentences of Roman numeral 2. Is there somebody who wants to read Roman numeral 2? Oh, we don't need to look at that. All right. Thank you, Lynn.
Reish Lakish says, Satan, the evil inclination, and the angel of death are one. That is, they are 3 aspects of the same essence. He is the
in fact, I'll even cut you off there. I'll even just limit it to one piece. But as Etty made the jump in discussing the Breita, the first text that we did, and she mentioned the evil inclination, this thing called the Yetzer Hara. I love this text. Reish Lakish is a fascinating character in the Talmud. That's a rabbit hole. Ooh, remember I said rabbit hole tonight when you get the April Devar, which hopefully you'll have in the next few days. Rabbit hole has kind of got my head stuck in rabbit holes. But there are these different things that are different. Satan is a divine being. I have no idea what Satan is. In the literature, in the folklore, Satan is a divine being who is somehow related to getting people to behave badly and then getting God to judge them for it and maybe even punishing them, right? But Satan's a character. The evil inclination, as Etty commented before, it is just some kind of innate force of the human psyche, right? It's got at times a super ego flavor to it. It definitely has id or libido as part of it. The Yetzer Hara gives itself very easily into the Freud and post-Freudian world in terms of that part of us that wants what we're not supposed to have. Whether it's, simple things like that temptation, I want to put my hand on the hot glass of the kettle, or that sensation of being up on the bridge and thinking, what would it be like to jump? Or the East African grilling chicken, and I really want to eat it, that we have this this desire, the things that we can't have. I quoted my grandfather the other day in a specific context. My grandfather used to say when we were young and whatnot, my mom's dad of blessed memory, he would say, absence makes the heart grow fonder of other women. That was like one of my grandfather's great lines. Remarkable how often. Point being, you're not supposed to have other women, but there's a tempting, or other men, or other, right? There's something about the forbidden that we are attracted to. So again, you can do that lots of, that is the Yetzer Hara, or the rabbinic piece to it. And then the angel of death is the angel of death, right? The angel of death is the one who comes by in the folklore of classic rabbinic lore. He has a knife, and the knife sort of sucks the life out of you. It's not like, in the same way maybe that a regular knife would drain the blood from you. The dagger of the angel of death sucks the life out of you. It drains the life out of you. And he's also a figure in rabbinic lore. And what Reish Lakish says is that these three characters are really the same character. Now, I think we can understand that in different ways. What could he be saying when he says that that Satan, the evil inclination, and the angel of death are all the same thing, or all the same character? Somebody else help me.
Well, I'm not sure about your translation, but it doesn't say it's the same person. It's the same essence. It's the same character. It's the same, essence is a great word. I'm not sure if that's exactly the translation, but it's a great word to say it's the same. So that's how I read it, as opposed to the same individual.
Okay. So, but help me understand then what you mean by essence. Just again, as a comment, the translators from the Schottenstein, the bold is their attempt to give a literal translation, and here I think they get it wrong. And the non-bold is their way to make it intelligible. The Hebrew is really cool. Amar Reish Lakish said, "Who Satan? He is Satan. Who Yetzer Hara? He is evil inclination. Who Malach HaMavet? He or it, whatever, is the angel of death." Okay, so it doesn't say that the three of them are one, which is what the bold says. It creates linguistically, I think it's really, really cool. But I think a good reading of it is that they are, whether they are the same, or they are equal, or they serve the same purpose, or I don't know what Reish Lakish is implying by saying that they are, you want to play with of the same essence. So I don't know, how does that strike you in a certain way, Marvin, as to what that means?
They're all problematic for people's behavior, for people's lives. They're all something negative that's going to occur.
Yeah, on some level, my life would be better, where I wouldn't get into trouble, if it wasn't for Satan, if it wasn't for the evil inclination, and if it wasn't for the angel of death. Something like that. I like it. Does that sound about right, Marvin?
To me, it does, but I see Lynn has her hand up, so we'll find out from Lynn.
Yeah, well, honestly, reading this, Reish Lakish isn't giving a rational or an explanation through commonalities of this. What he's doing is he's using a Talmudic technique, the verbal analogy, and he's pulled an extraneous word out of three things from Job, Genesis and Job, and using the word only. And that's a tremendously common Talmudic thing. You just take three sentences that have a superfluous word, and if it's the same superfluous word, because the whole thing is written with a purpose and every word means something, then those superfluous words being the same one in those sentences means they must all have something to do with one another. And so he's taking the the verbiage of the text, and he's using the verbiage of the text itself to say that these things all have something in common. That's a exegetical principle that is in the front of the Siddur.
Good. So that's right, from the 13.
Right.
If you come to shul at 9:30, you get to read it anyway. So just to make sure everybody understands, Reish Lakish here has identified 3 verses that all use this simple preposition. I think it's a preposition meaning only. Reish Kuf, Rak. And in the case of Job, it says that it says it about Job. It says it about, it says it about the Satan. It says it about the Yetzer Hara in the Noah story. And then it says it, he says, about the angel of death, because that text has to do with life and death. Again, they're all a stretch. And I agree with Lynn, but the question I want to ask is, but then what does it mean? It's not just the linguistic observation that in these 3 different contexts, this very common pedestrian word is used. Reish Lakish is making a statement that it's significant that in these 3, he could pick any other rock from the rest of biblical tradition, because I think he wants to say something, and I don't totally know what he wants to say. I got ideas. One of them, I like Marvin's, is these are the 3 things that mess with humanity, or that ruin humanity, or that keep us up late at night, or some such. All right, Devin?
It strikes me that it's describing the same process we saw in the first verse. So Satan is the tempter, the evil inclination is the decision to sin, and the angel of death is the result of the meeting.
Nice. So when Satan comes as, as Satan, that's, perhaps that's misleading, or I would do them in a different order, I think, if I'm understanding you correctly. When this thing comes to mislead you, that's the evil inclination. When this thing rats you out to God, so God notices that you messed up, that's Satan. And then when you get punished for it, that's the angel of death.
Yes.
Nice. So in the earlier text, where I think there actually are 4 pieces, but this is now giving a name to, or a job title or whatnot, to each of those 3 experiences. That's a lovely reading. I hadn't thought about that. I like it. Nicely done. Other thoughts? All right. I think it fits in certainly for Marvin, it fits for Davin, and Lynn is correct. That that is the basis for it, but it is, similar to the way in which the first text from the same page of the Talmud, Baba Batra 16a, explains why the world functions the way that it will. And we know this. Why sometimes do I make bad choices? And why does it seem like the people always catch me doing wrong, or God always doesn't catch me the 99 times that I did it right? I get caught the one time my hand's in the cookie jar, rather than the 99 times I pass the cookie jar, right? And why is it that there are consequences when I do this? And, and these 2 different texts are different ways of framing that this is part of the way the system is made. This is the system. And I love that. I'm just cracking myself up. Lynn started laughing at one point. I don't know if that was her observation about the hermeneutic, the way in which Reish Lakish works here. But I'm laughing because it's 8:10. In my mind, this class is 7 to 8:30, and I'm about to turn off of page 1. So we'll see. We're not going to be done at 8:30. I promise you, if I'm still talking at 8:50, I will close my mouth before 9 o'clock at the latest. And anybody who doesn't want to stay for that long, I understand it. And I'll record till the end. But time is a funny thing. All right, anybody want to add something? Because then I'm going to try and get us through a number of the other pages. There is some truly, I think those are both remarkable texts. Yeah,
I
Jean?
just want to add something. You just talked about it all being part of the system. And that's what struck me about the first passage, that because Satan came down from above, came back up, and he needed to ask permission, meant he was part of the system, and that there is a system that he is part of.
Yes, and he has a role to play, right?
Yes, yes, exactly.
You know, I think that's really important, and I think that we'll see that in a number of texts, and we'll see it again. Everything I brought is, I only brought things that I can say explicitly are satanic. You know, so there's a whole 1,000 examples of things that are only about the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, that I haven't brought, that I think are of the same ilk. If we go along kind of one of the streams about the role of Satan, the who, what, not the who, because the who is Satan versus the evil inclination, but the what and the why. I think that, similar to Marvin's comment about the essence, that they function similarly, the evil inclination and Satan, to explain our world. That is, they are part of our cosmology, right? That they explain why the why and the how of the world, and they kind of are different storytelling techniques, or different therapeutic, options, or different theological constructs, but that they're of the same ilk. But I'm focused on the satanic. We'll save the evil inclination for another day. Thank you, Gene. Another day, another 10 days. Also on the same page of the Talmud. By the way, I started with my little 5-minute lecture on the Talmud. There are places in the Talmud, lots of them, where the editors of the Talmud get stuck on a theme or an idea and then bring together a whole bunch of examples around the same idea. Again, it's a shame that there are not more people who study folklore who then come to do serious Talmudic study. To me, it is the single greatest collection of folklore, because not only does it contain all of these pieces of our sacred storytelling, but we have a whole other layer of the Talmud, which is the way that it's edited, right? What I've done is non-contextual. I've pulled out a bunch of pieces, but you notice these pieces that I think are similar, all are on the same page in the Talmud, because the editors said, oh, these pieces are similar. And not only because they mention Satan, because I think Satan is mentioned 197 times in the Talmud. I think when I did the search, I came with 197 references to Satan. And so if there are 6 of them around Baba Batra 16a, and there are another bunch of them, Sanhedrin in the high 90s, and another couple of them that the editors have said, not only are they related because they're about Satan, but they're related because of their ideas. They could have made a Masechet Satan and done 197 stories about Satan and had it be its own tractate in the Talmud. Christians would have done that because Satan is so cool and so central and all the rest. He deserves his own book, right? And if you disagree with me, talk to Dante, talk to Milton. Christian world, Satan deserves his own book. Our world, we got editors, and different thematic uses are in different places. I love Roman numeral 3. So if you flip over to the other side, sorry, somebody started to interrupt me.
I do too.
What's that?
I love it too. I remember reading Baba Batra and loving this paragraph.
It's a gem. So let's read it. And then again, you may not like it. It's one of those texts, by the way. It is starting where we started. And, in the old days, we had a Christian minister. We actually had 2 different ones over time who would come to our Talmud study classes. And like half the time it would make sense to them and they think they would get it. And then something totally absurd would happen. I'm going to get to the prostitute text, and I'm going to get to the Satan sex text and whatever. And something would happen. They'd be like, how is that the Talmud? It makes no sense. And I think this is one of those texts that's so inherently Jewish in terms of a multiplicitous, that's a good adjective, multiplicitous understanding of Satan, right? that rather than making Satan a one thing, now also from that same page of Talmud, who would like to read Roman numeral number 3? Rabbi Levi says. Nobody
I
else
can
wants
read.
Thank you, Etty.
Rabbi Levi says, both Satan, who brought accusations against Job, and Penina, who tormented Hannah, mother of Samuel the prophet, acted with intent that was for the sake of heaven.
Okay, I'm going to just pause. Haftorah from the second day of Rosh Hashanah, from the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 1. Fella has 2 wives. One of them produces a lot of kids. One of them does not have any children. And the one who produces a lot of kids is not nice. That's Penina, is not nice to Hannah, the woman, the wife who has no children. And so the parallel is made that, Satan torments Job. This is a parallel, and somehow that's similar to what Penina does to Hannah. Okay? There's a little bit of story background. And the statement from Rabbi Levi that both of them are L'Shem Shemayim Nitkavunu, that their intentions were that this was somehow holy or righteous, this category called sake of heaven. All right, keep reading.
As for Satan, when he saw that the Holy One, blessed be he, inclined to favor Job and praised him, he said, heaven forbid that he should forget the love of Abraham. With regard to Penina, as it is written, and her rival wife also provoked her sore to make her fret, i.e., Penina upset Hannah in order to motivate her to pray. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov taught this in his Papchunya, and Satan came and kissed his feet in gratitude for speaking positively about him.
Okay, so first, Satan acts in the, L'Shem Shemayim, for the honor of God, something righteous, however we exactly understand that. And somebody explain how that works in the example. As for Satan, when he saw the Holy One blessed, inclined to favor Job, and he said, heaven forbid that he should forget the love of Abraham. Somebody want to explain how Satan is acting out of respect for God or righteousness or for the sake of heaven or some such. No? All right, Lynn?
My big mouth. As I saw it, it seems, we are all the descendants of Abraham, and the Jewish religion and all of this and the Talmud and everybody else and everything we do and all of us here, we are all here and have what we have because of God's love for Abraham, his devotion to Abraham, his decision that Abraham deserved to be as numerous, have descendants as numerous as the stars and the sand of the beaches. And here there was a possibility maybe Job would shove himself in there, and Job's descendants and some other fleet of people would have this other religion and be God's beloved. And so Satan did this, and it helped that Abraham would remain the favored, and in the way that Penina somehow produced good from being a nasty person.
Let's do one at a time. Let's just do one at a time to make sure we understand the pieces. But I think you're exactly right? The text in Job is God kind of boasts in the name of Job. Have you seen my servant Job, that there is none like him? And in this reading from Rabbi Levi, what Satan says is, no, problems are going to happen if Job becomes the one who is praised above all others, because that's supposed to be Abraham. That's why God chose him. That's why God brought him to the land. That's why God blessed his descendants and made them like the stars in the sky, and. So the Satan is coming to protect Abraham, Abraham's honor, Abraham's memory, the whole Jewish people, the whole Torah, right? If you throw out, Abraham's story is important, but he's like second grade. He's the B-rated hero next to Job, then you have to throw out the Torah, because the Torah doesn't matter anymore. You want to get talk about Job and Job's descendants and whatever else. And so in order to preserve God or for righteousness or for something, the Satan's got to knock Job down, a peg in God's estimation, so that Abraham will remain as the what's it, Av Hamon Goyim, the father of great many nations and so forth. Right? That's the reading of Job, that Job is acting in righteousness to preserve Torah and Abraham and the people and all that God has worked to create through Abraham and his descendants. And then in terms of Penina and Hannah, Sydney, are you raising your hand to say something, or are you playing with the light? Or are you waving goodbye? I can't even see you, but I saw your hand. If you're going goodbye, it's lovely to see you, Sydney. All right. Who can explain this text from 1 Samuel about how what Penina did when Penina abused Hannah was actually a righteous act? Every time Marvin leads forward, I think he's going to unmute and talk. Yes?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
So she, by making her feel so badly, she went to the synagogue to pray, and the priest, I think it was Eli, was that the high priest
Yep.
at the time, who said, why are you drunk, and what are you doing? And she says, no, I'm praying to have a child because I'm so sad. So, and then of course Samuel is born, who she then gives to the priesthood. So
And Samuel
by
will
doing
pick out.
all that, so by being nasty, Penina did something wonderful, is what Rabbi
Well-
Levy is trying to make us believe, which I certainly don't buy. But
Okay,
Marvin,
fair enough. You don't have to
wait,
agree with
well,
him, but
that's
but
what
well
Marvin, I
Rabbi
could-
understood.
Levy.
Julie?
Marvin, I could also add on, because isn't how Hannah prays, doesn't that define like how we pray today? Like it's an incredibly momentous moment, I guess, as well.
The rabbis learned a ton from the prayer of Hannah at Bethel, at Beit El. She prays, her mouth moving, and she's not speaking out loud. Eli thinks that she is drunk, and but you don't have to agree. That's the beautiful thing. Like, ask me what I think. Those of you who eat pork chops, stop eating pork chops. But you don't have to agree with anybody. You don't have to agree about why you should stop eating pork chops. You can have a totally different understanding for it. We can live in an intellectual universe that is all over the map. Maybe not all over the map, right? But almost all over the map. And I can still say to you, don't eat pork chops. Observe the Sabbath. Man, it's the nature of our tradition. So Marvin, if you don't like what Rabbi Levy says, outstanding. I got, that's half a page and 13 pages, and there actually are another 100 that I haven't included. I'm totally fine with it. I love this, right? You did a perfect job of explaining, and Julie adds on to it in terms of just how important it is that, Hannah has to come to shul to pray, or to go to the temple to pray, right? She has to, because otherwise God's not giving her the prophet Shmuel, right? And if we don't get the prophet Shmuel, we're not going to have kings. All right, Saul's not my favorite, but we're not going to get to David if we don't have Shmuel. And if we don't get to David, we're not going to get to the temple. We're not going to get any kind of mission. We need Hannah to go pray. And, bitchy Penina, the one that in his views, she does it to motivate her. It's kind of a tough love thing, maybe. You don't have to like it. We could have a long conversation about appropriate uses of tough love, and I agree with all of those things. But I'll tell you before I tell you, Lynn, tell us what you love about this text. Then I'll tell you what I love about this text.
Because it comes at the end in Bava Batra, at the end of pages and pages and pages of the rabbis discussing how the Satan tormented Job and how God played along. And you're kind of rankled at God to be part of this game. It's like a game that God and Satan are playing for a long time. And poor Job, it's the same poor Job as Job in the Talmud. And you get this one paragraph that kind of says, wait a minute. It was all for this. It was all for this kind of thing. It was like it's going along, it turns itself over and says this other thing, and then Satan comes and kisses Rabbi Rav Aha Bar Yaakov's feet. It's just such a surprise, shock.
So I could, beyond our short time together, first of all, it destroys the category of who we think Satan is, right? All of a sudden, Satan is a motivator towards righteousness, or some such. So it destroys the category. Again, if you have a nice, pretty picture of anything in our tradition, except for pork chops, any other nice picture, but everything fits in the lines, tear it up. That's not our lot in life. That's not what the world is like. That's not what Torah is like. That's not what the Talmud is like. That's not what Satan is like. That's not what any human being is like, right? You can't draw a human being in one dimension. You can't do it in 2 dimensions. You can't really do it in 3 dimensions, because 3 dimensions doesn't contain the emotional and the spiritual and the aspirational. And you want to draw a picture of a human being, you need a dozen axes to really paint the picture of a human being, right? And so you think Satan is any less complicated? So 1, blows apart the category. 2, there's this whole category of being open to redefining the way we see and experience things. So Satan, instead of the misleader, right, that Satan now becomes the one who pushes us in a way we don't like, in a direction we're not supposed to go, and without whom we wouldn't learn our most important lessons, or without whom we would, or without the critical role, rather than just being the SOB who ruins everything. And in the last chapter of Masechet Brachot, there's a whole bit on dreams. Roger Kamenetz, who wrote Jew in the Lotus and Stalking Elijah, wrote a book on Jewish dream interpretation. I have no recollection of what the book is called, but he does his own stuff. He used to be a literature professor at Carleton College. He does his own stuff on that 9th chapter of Brachot. But one of the sections there is that the meaning of a dream, or what happens after a dream, or how a dream comes true, is not from God, is not from the dreamer, it's from the person who interprets the dream. That the power for the meaning of the dream, or the power of what will happen in the future, devolves from the interpreter of the dream. And I think it's one of these brilliant insights that the storyteller creates the story. Even if you know the details, Rabbi Levi doesn't change any of the details. The Satan still mucks up Job's life, and Penina still pisses off Hannah. But the storyteller has created a totally different story without changing the biography, right? This text is a testament to the power of the storyteller. Here, people tell me that rabbis are teachers. I like rabbis as storytellers, okay? And storytelling is the way that we teach. It's right here. Does that make sense? And the Talmud is replete with storytellers who invert or turn things inside out to make a point. What's the point that Rabbi Levi wants to make? I don't know, but I'll tell you what I think. I think he wants to make the point that, sometimes the things that we call Satan actually are wonderful, wonderful gifts to us. Sometimes our worst days are actually our best days. We just need to survive them to see that. Sometimes our enemies or our antagonists, or, I don't know how many people have a bitchy co-wife, or it's kind of an odd relationship that one doesn't find very often anymore. Sometimes our nemesis is actually our dear friend to help us see what we're just even open to that possibility. So I love this text. I'm going to push us ahead. My clock says 8:30. They're still on the same page of the Talmud. the next steps, you got to sort of struggle with this idea of the upside down bowl, but we get within it, not just that Satan is the one who misleads or the one who gets us in trouble, but here the statement is made, and it is a quotation from one of the friends, interlocutors, antagonists of Job, Eliphaz, in the book of Job, and as read here in the Gemara, in the name of Rava, the statement is made somewhere in there that that Satan is in charge of the earthly realm, which is not what most of these images tell us, right? It's not generally, if I were just to have one session to talk about Jewish Satan, I wouldn't even include it. It's certainly a minority point, but it's here. It's a Gnostic idea. It's a Gnostic idea that Christianity has been struggling with for a long time, the Manichaeans, and all, that the world we live in is a world ruled by an evil God or an evil angel. Or I'm back to that same problem I had when Steve had asked me before. So it's not an idea that I like. It's not one that resonates with me. It's just in the Talmud and in the name of one of the greatest sages of the Talmud, in the name of Rava. And it's there. So I want to show that because it's really important to me. Every time somebody tries to mute or castrate or dismember Judaism to make it only three-dimensional, or God forbid, two-dimensional flat like the page of a book, or God forbid, one-dimensional, don't do it. Here I have a Satan vision that I can show you in an old Christian and Gnosticism, and it's not one I like, but it's in the Talmud in the name of one of the great sages. Does that make some sense? I want to get us to some of the smutty stuff. Again, you have the handout. You can read all of these as much as you would like. And you all have my phone number and my work space and my email address. And I would love to sit with anybody to do one or some. When you pick out your favorite, it would be a fun exercise for anybody who would choose their favorite. If you wanted to write a paragraph, maybe we need to add it as an addendum to the Devar, or maybe just email it to me and I'll email it to the group. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but this is great stuff. I've now switched. I'm out of Baba Batra. I'm into the New Year and Rosh Hashanah. And there's a great text there, and we're not going to read it because I'm going to try and go quickly to get, now that we're on page 3, having to do with explaining the different sounds of the shofar. And there's Teruah, there is Tekiah, and so forth. And the question is trying to understand why we have all of these different blasts. And at the end, in terms of this going from Teruah to Tekiah to Teruah, that we do after the Amidah, is, it says in the language of Kedei leharbev hasatan, in order to confuse Satan. And people love, everybody quotes the Maimonides text that the shofar is a alarm clock to wake you up in terms of moral terms. Awake, O you slumberers, or some such, I think our Machzor translates it. So the Talmud here, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, has a different view, at least of this one piece, that as opposed to calling us to repentance, call us to repentance because sinning is my fault and I need to fix it. That's the classic, that's the big image. I'm not arguing against it. I'm putting up next to it, no. Blow the shofar, because one of the reasons why we're in trouble on Rosh Hashanah isn't only because of what we did. It's Satan's fault, because Satan misled us, and Satan is giving testimony about how crappy we are up on high. And so besides that, we have to do repentance. And again, this shouldn't replace all of the normative 10 days and repentance, all the tshuva stuff and so forth. But no. Wouldn't it be great? Like, what if you could drug Satan, right? What if you could just keep him on ether, or I don't know, maybe he'd be less dangerous if he was drunk all the time. And so the shofar is like, slipping a Mickey to Satan, so that on these days when we're going to be judged, he's not in his right mind to say Scott is a terrible human being. I have here a list of 834 things that Scott did wrong last year as he approaches the throne to seek repentance. But no. Da-da, 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 tekiah, teruah, tekiah. Right? No. Satan's confused. He's like, I got him drunk, so now he's hung over on Yom Kippur, so I don't have him testifying against me. It is, so far removed from all of our psychological understandings. It's so far removed from the way to repentance is to repair the heart and to fix the deeds and all that stuff that is, maybe that's 99.9% of what our Yontif teaching is about. But here's why, no, if part of the system is there's parts of the system that conspire against me, that have me set up for failure, right? Satan's role is to encourage me to fail rather than to encourage me to succeed, except in that last text where we read, where Satan helps me to succeed. But bracket that now. I have a different picture of Satan in my mind. Satan is the stumbling block to keep me from being the righteous person that I want to be. So one answer is I have to redouble my efforts to be righteous. Yes, but that's boring. Another answer is I need to just, blast sound waves at Satan. Satan, don't pay attention to me. Satan, don't tell God what I've done wrong. Satan, be disoriented. I don't know. I think it's a very fun text. A couple of you are smiling. Anybody have any questions or reactions or thoughts? It's a totally different vision of the shofar and its role in our getting. What's the goal? Some people will tell me the goal is to become more righteous as human beings. I like it. Somebody else will tell me, I just want my name written and sealed in that book, right? Tell me what I need to do. I need to be nicer. I need to clean up my room. I need to make my bed. I need to help old ladies across the street. I need to stop, yelling at my brother. Tell me what I need to do. Not because this righteousness thing is what keeps me up late at night, but I really want to be written and sealed in the book of life for the coming year. I'm telling you, I really want to be written and sealed in the book of life for the coming year. And it's not beyond me. If you think that it'll help my odds, if I can, smack Satan in the back of the head, or take the big symbols, make it like a cartoon moment, and give him a good clock on his head. And that's what I got no problems with that. Satan's not looking out for me. I don't need to look out for Satan, right? There's something that I find compelling there, right? Like, it's okay to work the system. I'm not breaking rules by trying to confuse the Satan. I'm just trying to get my name written and sealed. I don't know if anybody else has any reactions. I commented on that text, but I just realized that I didn't actually have either one of those texts. Sorry. This is that text, Roman numeral 5, that I was just referring to. I haven't been strolling along. Any other pieces? Now that it's a little bit later, some of you are drinking. I noticed Yvette had Tabasco, so we got now a little bit of hot sauce. This is the hot sauce page, starting on page 4. Actually, it starts on the bottom of page 3 from the second Kiddushin. And this is where, it's a shame Ruth Levy isn't here, because Ruth Levy loves to get mad at the sages in the Talmud. It's one of her virtues. And one of the things, it's a misogynistic text. Credit the authors of ancient texts that they were ancient in their understanding. Credit authors of medieval texts that they were medieval. They didn't understand gender or people the way we do. We know much more than they did. And I can give an absurd number of examples. So things that are unequivocally misogynistic to us are all over the place. So all kinds of stuff about the way the Talmud and the rabbis regulate and control and put into kennels women, whether that's literal or figurative. That stuff really irks Ruti, and she'll blurt out with, just because they can't control themselves. Women have to cover their hairs because men are lecherous. Like men should have to cover their eyes. Women should have to cover their hair. You know, makes perfect sense. So now we're in the.
And you have a problem with that?
No, I think she's right. I think she's right. I think it's time that there's a creation of a serious literature about Judaism, about the nature of the world. I think it's a literature that shouldn't just be philosophical in the Aristotelian and Maimonidean way. I think it needs to be a sacred literature that is also folklore about how story gives us our identity, that reflects the world that we know to be true. Okay, that reflects the world that we know to be true, which is not a world in which women cannot be trusted to give testimony in court. The rabbis believed they believed that about deaf people and mute people. But then in the 19th century, people who couldn't hear and people who couldn't speak became smart enough to give testimony in Jewish courts. Orthodoxy evolved in the 19th century to allow for those who are deaf, or those who have the handicap of not being able to hear, and those who are unable to speak, they can give testimony because we now know that they are smart enough and trustworthy enough. And in the Orthodox world, women still are not smart enough or trustworthy enough. Somehow 19th century rabbis could learn that about people who have hearing impairments and people with speech impairments, but not apparently people who are lacking the proper genitalia. Okay, I'm unabashed. I do not blame people in the Middle Ages to being medieval. I have no patience for people in the 21st century for being medieval. We know too much. These texts I love. These are not normative texts that one should base your ethics or anything else, though there are things to learn from them, including getting upset by them. Anyway, I'm going to go quickly through some of them. Actually, this one, I will interrupt you, but would somebody read it? That way I'll let the text, but thank you. Etty's read. Is there anybody who hasn't read? This is a nice chuckle text. We got a series of chuckle texts coming up. Anybody else before I say yes to Etty who hasn't read yet? All right, thank you, Etty.
The Gemara relates, those captive women who were brought to Nehardea, where they were redeemed, were brought up to the house of Rav Amram the Pious. They removed the ladder from before them to prevent men from climbing up after them to the attic where they were to sleep.
Pause. I'm sorry. So you can go back earlier in Kiddushin to get the story of these women who were rescued. But now these women who are now rescued, and they are in Nehardea, in this Jewish city in Babylon, and they are being housed, in an upper chamber. And the way you get up to it is the ladder, and they remove the ladder. This is like the comment about hair. Why do they remove the ladder? Do they remove the ladder because there's a problem with the women, or because there's some issue? Why do they remove the ladder?
Because the men will climb up.
Correct. You have to remove. These women are now trapped on the second floor. God forbid there should be a fire or some such, because there's no ladder. Why are they trapped on the second floor? Because men are lecherous. And men can't control their sexual urges. That's why these women are, who have just been rescued, are now once again held captive. Right? They're now prisoners of a different kind, prisoners of people who like them and whatever, but they're prisoners of a different kind, and they're imprisoned by the uncontrollable male libido or some such. Yes? All right. I think keep reading.
When one of them passed by the entrance to the upper chamber, it was as though a light shone in the aperture due to her great beauty.
Everybody pause in one deep sigh for the perfect objectification of this hot woman passing in front of the lantern. There's a
light shone in the aperture.
Jennifer came home. That was earlier. If you've noticed, there was a light that shone through behind me. There's a beautiful parable that, again, choose how you're going to read it, in the Zohar, about the beautiful maiden, and she is the Torah, but it comes directly from here in a different space. All right. So now all those lecherous men have no idea of what's hidden up there on the second floor.
Out of his desire for her, Rav Amram grabbed the ladder the 10 men together could not lift, lifted it on his own, and began climbing.
Everybody understood? Right? Testosterone is good. Libido gives you strength that without it you would not have. And trust me, if you would have seen the light that shined through, you would understand how Rav Amram had the strength of 10 men to lift this ladder.
When he saw the hair. When he was halfway up the ladder, he strengthened his legs against the sides of the ladder to stop himself from climbing further, raised his voice and cried out, "There is a fire in the house of Amram."
Yeah, he caught himself halfway up the ladder. What is this fire in the house of Amram?
Upon hearing this, the sages came and found him in that position. They said to him, "You have embarrassed us, since everyone sees what you had intended to do." Rav Amram said to them, "It is better that you be shamed in Amram's house." I love how he talks about himself in the third person. "It is better that you be shamed in Amram's house in this world and not be ashamed of him in the world to come. He took an oath that his evil inclination should emerge from him, and an apparition similar to a pillar of fire emerged from him. He said to his evil inclination, 'See, as you are fire and I am mere flesh, and yet I am still superior to you, as I was able to overcome you.'"
Okay, a couple of quick things just in terms of our conversation and knowing to move forward. One, the text doesn't anywhere say evil inclination. The English does that all in non-bold text. That is the translators or the interpreters' emendation to it. It doesn't say Satan either, by the way. I've given us this text because in a moment we're going to look at the next text, and I'm pretty sure these are contiguous on 81a and Kiddushin. So, but the next text isn't going to make as much sense until I get this good introduction to libido, strength, temptation, lechery, masculinity. And that it's tied to their spiritual well-being, right? And so I like the rebuke that you've embarrassed yourself because you're halfway up the ladder instead of just sneaking yourself down or whatever. And his comment, better to be shamed now and here than to have eternal shame on the other side when my time comes. Okay. I want to get to the next text, but anything there you want to comment on?
It's interesting how Rav Avram is the pious in this in his name. I don't know.
Oh, it is. Yeah, nice. Right? Which in English always sounds like a pope's name. I'm just saying.
I'm missing. Why didn't he just go down the ladder? Why did he yell about the fire? I'm not sure I understand that part.
Neat. I got an idea. I don't know if anybody else wants to respond to Marvin's question. So Cindy's laughing. I don't know if you want to explain your laughter to everybody. Lovely to see you smiling and laughing, Cindy.
The fire is a symbol of his desire.
Yeah, as I think
That's
it's the way.
fire.
Notice that the text says, and I could find the word, but even in the English, the text says that he strengthened, but they emend it so that you think that he strengthened his legs. That's Rashi, that he strengthened his legs against the side of the ladder to stop himself from climbing further. I would say a better translation would make it closer to arousal. And that's why he yelled and said, "Help, there's a fire burning. There's a fire burning below. Help." Right?
Well, in Hebrew, that's what you use.
Again, the idiom works in English, and I bet it does in French too. I'm just saying that my French is terrible. That's what it says. I mean, it's lovely that the Schottenstein, first of all, it's lovely that the Schottenstein makes it clear what they think is a literal translation and what they acknowledge is their explanation of it based on the tradition. I highly value it. I sincerely highly value it. But in a place like this, it becomes really, really funny because when you read that he's climbing up to go check out the hot babes, or better yet, to whatever, and it says that he strengthened, and then he screamed out, and then they said, "You should be ashamed of yourself." that doesn't sound like some weird thing that he put his legs on the side of his ladder so that he wouldn't climb up anymore. Rashi is trying to make him more righteous than he appears, or make the text more G-rated, right? He got aroused, and he's really, and that sort of somehow awakens his more noble side as opposed to his lustful side, and he calls out.
Perhaps it was unsafe for him to continue climbing.
Again, this stuff is very different. There's a reason sometimes why it's nice to be in, I don't know if gender means something different today. I don't know if it's why we should do things in separate gendered spaces. I don't know if it's why everything should be done with a couple of shots of tequila. I don't know if it's why maybe we should do this anonymously. I don't know why, in the presence of our president and a number of members of the board of directors, I want to acknowledge that this is a professional setting, and at all times I do not want to engage in any behavior, conduct, or speech that would be harassing or make anybody uncomfortable. But yeah, it would be really easy in a juvenile way to imagine that he somehow got himself into a predicament where he was stuck between the rungs of a ladder. It wasn't his leg that was holding him. That's what I think is so funny about the Rashi, because even just let it be phallic. He couldn't move on the ladder anymore because he was aroused or erect or again, I feel like I only remember the middle school ways to address these things. I don't remember grown-up ways to talk about them, and they still make me chuckle. Anyway, it's a great text. The next text is a smut text with Satan in it, okay? Because Satan is also, not only, but also about sexual desire and arousal and their vision of gender matters in this. Somebody popped into the chat about that was their understanding, and I agree with it, and I don't need to condemn it or I have no. Some people get upset because I give them too much kind of forgiveness or carte blanche. I have no problems when people were medieval in the Middle Ages. I have no problem when that's the way they saw these things, right? So, but it's not the way we see these things, okay? At least it better not be, because to think this way in the 21st century, I believe, is highly sinful and highly immoral, depending on what language. Again, I love the story. I love the text. I like smutty jokes. I like off-color humor in certain settings. Like, I'll own all of that, acknowledging it's a professional setting and I want to be professional at all times. But this stuff just cracks me up. But there's no parallel text to this about women sexual arousal, okay? And, it's true that the latter is taken away because men are sex-crazed animals. You don't get, there's no Rapunzel who's letting her hair down so that Rav Amram can climb up the ladder, because Rapunzel wants Rav Amram to be aroused after he climbs up her hair. That's not in this story, okay? This story is, reflects an understanding of sex, sexuality, and gender that is not ours, it is theirs. But it's part of our tradition. It is. And again, I brought the text. Let's get to the next one. Again, it's the continuing text on it. And again, I'm going to let somebody else read it, because I don't know that I can read it without interrupting myself. I'd rather interrupt you. Is there somebody who hasn't read yet who wants to read? Rabbi Meir, who's one of the heroes of the Talmud, one of the great sages, one of the students of Elisha ben Abuye, one of the contemporary of Rabbi Kiva, makes an appearance in Milton Steinberg's Leaves of Grass. He's one of the leaves of, that's As a Driven Leaf. Sorry, Walt Whitman with Lisa. Walt Whitman, Rabbi, they're all the same. As a Driven Leaf. And it turns out, well, somebody else read. Tell me what it turns out. Anybody who hasn't read yet who wants to read? Stephen, are you saying yes, but you're still muted?
Yes, I was saying yes.
Perfect.
The Gemara relates Rabbi Meir would ridicule transgressors by saying it is easy to avoid temptation.
Okay, so pause. First, the text just says that he teased sinful people. Schottenstein, based on Rashi, says that specifically what he teased them about is you guys are so morally weak, right? That's important to where we're going to get to. But notice that's an emendation to the text, not in the text. One day,
Satan appeared to him as a woman standing on the other side of the river.
Pause. I love this. First of all, it is, where's Koba when I need her? What's a cool word for shapeshifters? There's like I can't have it. Oh, well, Koba would give me that word if she were here. But we have them in the Avengers universe. We have them in Dungeons and Dragons. Shapeshifter is a cross-cultural folklore archetype. Things that can take on a different appearance than they have.
Mutating.
I'm feeling like I should know a good word here, and Koba would pull it out and give it to me in a second. And Satan can do that, which is really good. If you want to deceive people or mislead people, if you could be a shapeshifter or whatever, some form of chameleon, that would be really good because you could pretend to be somebody else, or you could. That's my second point. Folklore motif or archetype. Convenient to be, if one is in the deceit business, to be able to disguise oneself here in a very deep way. And 3, Satan hides himself as a woman. Think about what that means. If part of the role that what or why that is Satan is, it gives us some measure of excuse for the bad things that we do, right? Then every beautiful woman is partially at fault for every adulterous or sexually violent, or think about how awful that is when you frame it that way. Right? She's the temptress, right? She's the temptress, impersonator. Thank you for helping me with that word. But she's Satan. She's the temptress. It's her fault that, what did that Hollywood producer do when he called the young starlets up into him? He dropped his pants and played with himself. But it wasn't his fault. She was Satan when she came up into his room, and that's why he touched himself. Do you hear that in this text? This is that narrative merged with the narrative that sometimes when people sin, it's not their fault because they were misled by Satan. So the beautiful woman, and here it's Rabbi Meir. Oh, I got other funny stories about Rabbi Meir. So let's just get the rest of the story and see what happened, because Satan appeared to him as a beautiful woman on the other side of the river.
Since there was no ferry to cross the river, he took hold of a rope bridge and crossed the river. When he reached halfway across the rope bridge, the evil inclination left him and said to him, "Were it not for the fact that they proclaim about you in heaven, be careful with regard to Rabbi Meir and his Torah. I would have made your blood like 2 ma'ah, completely worthless, since you would have fallen completely from your spiritual level."
Okay, so again, it doesn't have, maybe it does. You can agree or disagree with me. I'm not trying to convince myself. It doesn't have, the arousal, but it is got an interrupted flavor to it, as opposed to being halfway up the ladder. He is halfway across the river, and he's got to go to great length. So he's like Rav Amram, who can lift this super heavy ladder, but in this case, he's doing this tightrope walking kind of thing that would be dangerous, and he would have never done it otherwise, and so forth. But oh my God, did you see what's on the other bank? That temptation that's waiting there for him, and halfway there, he manages to get his wits about him, manages to recover his nobility, maybe, or his sense of righteousness. And again, the Schottenstein says the evil inclination left him. So it's interesting that Satan is both the figure of the woman on the far bank, and at least to the extent to which you conflate Satan and the evil urge or the evil inclination, Satan is also implicit there, which I think is interesting and neat. And given more time, we could spend a lot more for. And we have, it's a reference that having to do with Rabbi Meir. Remember, part of the rebuke of Rav Amram on the ladder is better shame in this world, shame that I was tempted, but I didn't do anything, than actually trying to hide it and committing sin and whatnot and being shamed in the next world. Here too, there's a certain kind of public shame in this rebuke of Rabbi Meir. And it's again related to blood. That's the part that you can decide that maybe I'm taking it too far, because part of me thinks maybe I am taking it too far. I don't think I'm wrong in terms of the silliness of Rav Amram's erection on the ladder. I think that's unequivocally there. Here, the idea of blood and blood draining when he gets his wits about him, maybe it's there, maybe it's not there. I haven't even convinced myself, but it's at least worth noting in terms of blood flow and passion and male arousal and so forth, because I think it's there. I think Satan changed the flow of time. It really is 9 o'clock. I want to do a couple of things. I want to do a little bit of a tour of the 3/4 of the handout that we haven't gotten to. First, we have a similar story now about Rabbi Akiva. I said Akiva and Meir have a connection and whatever else, but a similar story where Satan appears as a woman and Rabbi Akiva is tempted, and even the same issue around his blood draining and what it means. We get the story, one of the great lust stories of the Bible. We get the David and Bathsheba story, and Satan becomes part of that David and Bathsheba story. So where we started, I made the point that Satan's somewhere in that mix of explanation and excuse for people who behave badly. Explanation because, if David didn't see the naked lady taking a bath, he never would have committed adultery and murdered Uriah and, right? So it's like both the explanation and a little bit of the excuse that maybe it's not totally my fault because I saw the naked lady, and so, or the woman in the second story, and. So Satan doesn't appear as the naked lady. He actually appears as a little bird as a feminine image, bird as an ideal that can't be reached. Bird is a great motif or archetype that, save it for another day or let me take you out to coffee. We get a more righteous story. Satan appearing as a beggar and the way the beggar gets treated. And then Satan pretends to die and people scream because the beggar is embarrassed through the action of this person named Pelimo. And so that's a fascinating understanding. And I think it's really neat because in some ways I like this text much more. It's not nearly as funny as the guy with an erection trying to climb a ladder, but as opposed to using misogynistic storytelling as a way to talk about temptation, I think it has an implicit critique about the ways in which we do and don't take care of the poor that is present in this text, which I think makes this text very important and worthy of a slow read. There's a fun thing, again, still about sex, about the age of marriage, and a piece from the morning Siddur, and that gets us halfway through the handout. And I'm going to stop there because we're a few minutes past 9. I don't know where we go from here, except we're going to go there next Thursday night. I don't know if we will pick up and do some more of these texts or if I will make the jump. This stuff is too much fun, but it's not only fun. I really do think that that the Satan tales are a wonderful opportunity to think about and address issues around temptation, around desire, which aren't the same thing, around self-control, accountability, culpability. I think that the creation of this character, and I treasure. I mean, in the deepest way of who I am, I treasure being part of an intellectual and spiritual tradition that doesn't make of this character or any other character, including God, something simple and neat and, you know, and two-dimensional and but rather when we use words like temptation and desire and lust and weakness and culpability and accountability and punishment and those just aren't things that line up as an easy. I mean, the lesson's easy. Don't misbehave. Be good at all times. Like, that's easy. But how do you actually, you know, create your own life, construct your own life to such that you don't even climb that ladder? You look away when there's somebody naked, you know, in your line of sight, or you offer them a towel, or I don't know what the right thing to do is. When you know, how do you create an awareness of how we're supposed to act and behave, and then create, you know, a culture of accountability, of accepting responsibility, a culture of tshuva, of repentance and atonement. And I mean, you know, you could write for 2,500 years and still not get to the one answer for those things. And the people who inherit that 2,500 years of writing about it are in a far better place, because, you know, we're like, we live in the midst of an artwork of a fantasy world of, you know, of this beautiful, crazy experience that is beyond any explanation. And yet we tell stories and new stories all the time to try and explain it. Okay. And so, to be completely honest, until in some ways it started like a year ago when Lynn said, you mentioned Satan and Judaism, we should have a Satan class. But it really, for me, if you would have asked me, you know, the first class I think was the first week in February, and I really got excited about the research I was doing in late December. I knew the stuff that I knew, and that stuff was exciting, but it has only gotten more and more exciting to me as an incredible and odd example of these things that really are part and parcel of who we are as Jews, and of the Jewish tradition, of our textual tradition, of our desire to be on a path of righteousness, of our constant need to repent and repair ourselves and the world around us. And who knew? That's also going back to Roman numeral 3. It's part of why I like the heroic side of Satan rather than simply the blaming side of Satan, because I really do think there's very deep stuff that's here. If we could read it and share it and talk about it, and through stories, go on to lead holy lives in the context of community. I'm going to stop there. I don't know if anybody else would like to share anything or ask any questions. I will remind you that next Thursday night, there will be Satan class at 7:00, and we will either continue with this or I won't be able to resist the next set of stuff and we'll go on. But be here either way. You know, I guarantee you I will be very interested in what I'm teaching, and I hope you are too. Anybody want to share anything? Thank you for the lovely comments in the chat window. It's nice. But
Thank you,
anybody
Rabbi.
have any other comments or questions? Yeah.
They were good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very, very
Thank
nice.
you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
I
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Thank you.
night.